Hi everyone, so I'm starting to decorate these envelopes. I'm starting with the craft envelope uh, at the back of the folder. I'm using an acrylic gesso. It's just a brand that I get from an art shop here. It's nothing special, but just a normal gesso. I'm using a stippling brush. They're old stippling brushes, they're not expensive. This is not something that you would do with good brushes because what I'm trying to do is start like an aging process. So I'm wanting to put the gesso onto the craft envelope first to create a base, and doing it this way it's called dry brushing, and it dries very quickly. So I'm also wanting to stamp, do some script stamping on this, some inking and some script stamping to make this envelope look vintage. So this is my first step. I'm really pushing quite hard on that it's called a stippling brush, and I've got a few of them, and they do give up after a little while because you really press quite hard to get that sort of into the paper. And as you can see, there's some places where if you go a little bit heavy or you think it's too heavy for you, you can actually go in with, I just use a paper towel here, or you could use a baby wipe and use your heating tool to dry it a little bit. So I'm just continue on to do that, but really push it into the paper. That's why I use why I do it on the craft envelopes. I like those because they're quite sturdy, they're quite a good cardstock, and they're not not flimsy, and they can take it, and it gives this really sort of a feel to it, like an aged feel to it too when it's finished, like a dry brushed feel. So I particularly like it. So that's a step that I'm doing now. And then it's fairly much dry. You can just about touch it or do anything on it now. So I'm going to go ahead and do some inking now. Some inking. And what I'm using is the Tim Holtz. It's called Brush Corduroy. It's probably a little bit lighter than Vintage Photo and a lot lighter than the walnut stain. They're the two I usually use. And I like it because it looks like it makes it with the gesso and on the craft card, it makes it look really old, like it's been sitting with a stack of papers or something like that. It gives a really nice effect. So that's what I'm doing now. And I use a sponge most of the time. I do have the blending tools, but before this I like to go quite heavy and go right in and just do spots where it would look like it's been sitting somewhere. Okay, so then I've chosen my script stamp that I've got, and I'm going to use the same ink again so that it looks vintage and looks a bit faded. This is the back of the envelope, and I'm just putting it here all different ways, hitting and missing. I'm not making it so that it's absolutely perfect. I want it to look like it's faded in spots. And then I'm just looking for a piece of paper here, because piece of scrap paper, because I just want to protect that part where just before the flap there, because it doesn't matter about the flap's going to be covered, but I just didn't want the ink to go up there where your journal card would go. I wanted that to be kept clear. So then I continue on. I've turned it over and I'm doing the front, which will end up being the back of this stack of letters in the flip out. So that's done, and then my next step is I've got a piece of an offcut of wallpaper, and I've got a piece of old lace that's off something, just an offcut that I had, and I thought it would look nice along there. So I'm going to, I did want to cut off that end, but I'm thinking twice about that because I want it all to sort of hang out the sides, sort of. I quite like that look. So I'm just trimming it up a little bit. It was cut off an old top, a lady's top, and there's a few little bits that need to be tidied. I'm just going to use my glue gun to glue this down with, and you could use Fabri-Tac or the fabric type glues. You could even use art glitter glue if you want, but I wouldn't use, as you'll see further on when I do the wallpaper, I do use a glue stick, not a particular brand of glue stick. I just use one that is from my local cheap shop, if you like. I've got that for a lot of things, but if I was selling this to somebody, or, well, putting it in my Etsy shop, or I was sending this to somebody through the mail, I would probably use a better quality. If you wanted to use a glue stick, if you like glue sticks, I'd probably use a better quality one, but or hot glue, or the Fabri-Tac or something. But if you particularly like to use only uh, glue sticks, this doesn't really react very well to fabrics. And also papers, I do use it here, but also certain papers, if this is just for me, or if I was just gifting it to somebody as a present, and that's the glue stick I use. It's no particular brand. So if I was gifting it to somebody, I wouldn't worry too much, but if I was putting it into my Etsy store, I certainly would probably use my art glitter glue or something a little bit stronger, so it's never going to let go. Glue sticks are quite repositional. You can move it quite quickly. If you plop it down somewhere and it's in the wrong spot, it's uneven, you can pull it off quite quickly and reposition it, so it's good for that sort of thing. So I've just placed it there. It was just a piece I had left over. It's really pretty. It's got a lovely pattern, so yeah, on the back of that envelope, that's going to look very nice. So I'm just going to put that aside. And what I've done here is I've got the bag, the paper bag, and the other envelopes. I've cut my papers. I've cut some digitals that I have, and this one is for an antique papery, and I will list that at the end of the last video where you can find those. And this envelope here, there was a couple of bits I've had to join, and I'm going to take them to the sewing machine and sew them, and come back and show you what I've done.